You know that thing you keep putting off? Yeah, that one. The project, the workout, the tough conversation you tell yourself, I'll do it later, but later never comes. And instead of taking action, you scroll, binge watch, or convince yourself you'll feel more motivated tomorrow. Sound familiar? Well, here's the truth. Motivation is a lie. If you're waiting to feel ready, you'll be waiting forever. Procrastination isn't laziness, it's a habit. And like any habit, you can break it. So today, I'm going to show you exactly how to stop hesitating, stop overthinking, and start taking action right now. Motivation is one of the biggest myths we've been led to believe when it comes to taking action. People think that in order to do something, whether it's starting a business, going to the gym, or tackling a difficult task, they need to feel like doing it. They wait for a spark of energy, a wave of inspiration, or some magical moment when everything aligns and they suddenly want to get to work. But here's the truth. That moment rarely, if ever, comes. If you rely on motivation, you'll stay stuck exactly where you are. The reason this myth is so powerful is that it gives us an easy excuse to procrastinate. When we don't feel like working out, we tell ourselves, I'll start tomorrow when I'm more motivated. When we avoid a tough project, we say, I just need to get in the right mindset first. But motivation is fleeting. It's unreliable. It's like a friend who only shows up when things are exciting but disappears the moment things get tough. And because of this, people who depend on motivation to take action often find themselves trapped in a cycle of waiting. They wait to feel inspired, but the inspiration never comes. Days, weeks, even years go by, and they're still in the same place, wondering why they haven't made progress. The truth is, successful people don't rely on motivation. They understand that action comes before motivation, not the other way around. Think about the last time you dreaded doing something, maybe cleaning your house, writing an email, or going for a run. You didn't feel like doing it, but the moment you started, something changed. Your brain shifted gears and suddenly you were in motion. You got into the flow. That's because motivation is not a requirement for action, it's a result of action. Once you start moving, your brain naturally builds momentum and the task becomes easier. But if you wait until you feel like doing something, you'll keep waiting. This is where most people go wrong. They think that successful, disciplined individuals have some endless reservoir of motivation that keeps them going. They believe that these people wake up every day excited to take on challenges. But in reality, the most successful people don't always feel like doing the hard things either. They just don't let that feeling stop them. They know that motivation is unreliable, so they build habits, routines, and systems that remove the need for motivation entirely. They take action despite not feeling ready. They start even when they don't want to. And because they take action, motivation follows. There's actually a scientific reason behind this. Our brains are wired to resist effort and seek comfort. The moment we think about doing something difficult, our brain triggers a stress response. It tries to protect us by convincing us to avoid discomfort. That's why we hesitate before making a decision, why we put off tasks, and why we come up with excuses. But here's the key. That resistance only lasts for a few seconds. If you can push through that initial hesitation and take action before your brain talks you out of it, you can break free from the cycle of procrastination. The good news is, you don't need motivation to start. You just need to outsmart your brain's natural tendency to avoid effort. One way to do this is by using simple techniques that interrupt hesitation, like counting down from 5 and immediately moving into action before your brain has a chance to create an excuse. Another method is setting up your environment in a way that makes it easier to take action and harder to procrastinate, like laying out your workout clothes the night before or keeping distractions away from your workspace. Motivation is a feeling, and feelings are unreliable. But action is a choice. If you stop waiting to feel ready and start taking action, even in small ways, you'll create your own motivation. You'll prove to yourself that you don't need to feel inspired to do the things that matter. And once you start seeing progress, you'll build the confidence and momentum to keep going. No motivation required. Procrastination isn't just about being lazy or lacking discipline. It's a deeply ingrained habit that comes from how our brains are wired. Most people think they procrastinate because they don't have enough willpower or because they're not motivated enough. But the real reason is much more complex. At its core, procrastination is an emotional regulation problem, not a time management problem. It's not that we don't have enough time or that we don't know how to get things done. It's that we avoid tasks because they trigger uncomfortable emotions. Think about the last time you put something off. Maybe it was a work assignment, a difficult conversation, or even something as simple as organizing your space. The task itself wasn't impossible, but something about it made you feel uneasy. Maybe it seemed overwhelming, boring, or stressful. Maybe you feared failure or weren't sure where to start. Instead of facing that discomfort, your brain sought an escape. Scrolling on your phone, watching Netflix, or doing something easy felt better in the moment. And that's the key. Procrastination isn't about avoiding work. It's about avoiding feelings. This happens because our brains are wired to prioritize immediate comfort over long-term benefits. The moment we perceive a task as stressful, boring, or too difficult, our brain looks for ways to relieve that discomfort. This is why procrastination often feels good in the short term. It gives us temporary relief from stress. The problem is that relief is only temporary. The task doesn't go away. In fact, avoiding it often makes things worse. The longer we procrastinate, the more anxiety and guilt build up, making the task seem even more overwhelming. This creates a vicious cycle where we continue avoiding it to escape the stress, only to make ourselves feel worse in the long run. One of the biggest misconceptions about procrastination is that it's just about laziness. But if you look at what people do when they procrastinate, it's rarely nothing. They clean their rooms, organize files, watch educational videos. Sometimes they even work on other tasks. Procrastinators aren't lazy. They're just redirecting their energy toward things that feel easier and less emotionally demanding. The problem is those activities don't actually move them closer to their goals. They're just distractions that help them temporarily avoid discomfort. Another important factor behind procrastination is perfectionism. Many people put off tasks because they're afraid they won't do them perfectly, or they don't want to start unless they know they'll get it right. But perfectionism is just another form of fear of failure, fear of judgment, or even fear of success and the expectations that come with it. This kind of thinking can be paralyzing because it turns simple tasks into high-stakes situations. Instead of making progress, perfectionists get stuck in their heads, overanalyzing every detail, and ultimately doing nothing at all. Procrastination is also reinforced by our habits and environment. If you've trained your brain to associate certain tasks with stress, your natural response will be to avoid them. If your phone is always within reach, your brain will automatically seek out distractions whenever a task feels uncomfortable. The good news is, because procrastination is a learned habit, it can also be unlearned. The key is to understand why you're avoiding a task and change your response to that discomfort. Instead of waiting to feel motivated, you need to take action despite the discomfort. This means recognizing when you're avoiding something, acknowledging the emotions behind it, and then pushing forward anyway. A simple way to do this is by breaking tasks into smaller, less intimidating steps. When something feels overwhelming, your brain naturally resists it. But when you make it small and manageable, like committing to just 5 minutes of work, it becomes easier to start. And once you start, momentum kicks in. Another strategy is to remove distractions and create an environment that makes procrastination harder. If you know you tend to reach for your phone, put it in another room. If you get sidetracked by social media, use website blockers. Small changes like these can make a huge difference because they remove the easy escape routes your brain looks for when a task feels uncomfortable. Ultimately, procrastination isn't about laziness or lack of discipline. It's about how we handle discomfort. The more we train ourselves to take action despite feeling uncertain, the easier it becomes. The goal isn't to eliminate discomfort, it's to stop letting it control our actions. Once you understand that procrastination is just a habit your brain has developed to avoid stress, you can start rewiring that habit and finally take control. Procrastination isn't just a one-time decision to delay something, it's a pattern, a habit loop that our brains reinforce over time. Every time we hesitate on a task, we unknowingly train our brains to avoid discomfort. This loop starts with a trigger, something that makes us feel uneasy. Whether it's the complexity of a task, the fear of failure, or the sheer boredom of it, our brain, designed to protect us from discomfort, immediately seeks relief. Instead of facing the task head-on, we default to distractions. Scrolling through social media, watching videos, or doing easier, less important tasks. This provides temporary relief, making us feel better in the moment. However, as time passes, the task we avoided doesn't disappear, it lingers in the back of our minds, growing heavier with guilt and stress. This cycle repeats itself because of how our brains handle discomfort and rewards. The brain is wired to prioritize short-term comfort over long-term benefits. When we procrastinate, we receive an instant reward, the relief from avoiding stress or frustration. This trains our brain to associate avoidance with pleasure, making it more likely that we will procrastinate again in the future. Essentially, procrastination becomes a self-reinforcing loop, similar to other bad habits like excessive snacking or doom scrolling. The more we engage in avoidance behaviors, the stronger the habit becomes. One of the main reasons this habit loop is so hard to break is that the consequences of procrastination are often delayed. When you put off a project, the negative effects don't hit immediately. Instead, you feel a false sense of relief, which tricks your brain into believing that avoidance was the right choice. Only later, when the deadline looms closer and panic sets in, do the real consequences emerge. By that point, stress levels skyrocket, and you're left scrambling to complete the task under pressure. This last-minute rush might help you finish the task, but it reinforces the idea that you work best under pressure, which isn't true. It's just that pressure forces action. The next time a similar situation arises, the cycle begins again. Over time, this habit loop can become so automatic that we don't even realize we're doing it. It starts with a tiny moment of hesitation, "I'll do it later," which quickly turns into an unconscious pattern. The brain, always looking for the path of least resistance, makes avoidance the default response. This is why people often procrastinate on tasks they actually want to complete. It's not about laziness. It's about how their brains have been trained to react. The key to breaking this cycle is to recognize the habit loop as it happens. The moment you catch yourself hesitating, you need to disrupt the pattern before your brain can default to avoidance. One way to do this is by taking immediate, small action. Instead of letting yourself think about how hard or unpleasant a task might be, commit to just starting, whether it's writing one sentence, doing one push-up, or working for just 5 minutes. This interrupts the avoidance loop and shifts your brain into action mode. Once you start, it's much easier to keep going. Another way to break the cycle is by changing the way you perceive discomfort. Instead of seeing hesitation as a sign to back away, reframe it as a signal to move forward. When you feel resistance to a task, it's often because it's important. The discomfort means it matters. Instead of running from it, lean into it. Over time, this trains your brain to associate discomfort with growth rather than avoidance. It's also helpful to create external triggers that push you into action before procrastination takes hold. This could be as simple as setting a timer, creating a deadline, or using accountability partners who check in on your progress. By making the decision to start easier, you weaken the habit of hesitation and strengthen the habit of action. The most important thing to remember is that procrastination isn't a personality trait, it's a learned behavior. And like any habit, it can be unlearned. The more you practice taking action despite hesitation, the weaker the procrastination loop becomes. Eventually, your brain rewires itself to default to action rather than avoidance, and you no longer need to fight the urge to procrastinate. It simply fades away. Breaking the cycle of procrastination requires shifting from hesitation to immediate action. The problem most people face isn't a lack of ability or intelligence, it's the habit of overthinking and delaying. When you hesitate, even for a few seconds, your brain starts looking for ways to avoid discomfort. It magnifies the difficulty of the task, creates excuses, and convinces you that now isn't the right time. The longer you wait, the stronger the resistance becomes. The only way to stop this pattern is by acting before your brain has a chance to talk you out of it. Taking action doesn't mean you need to feel ready or motivated. In fact, you probably won't. Most people think they need to wait for the right mood or the perfect circumstances before they start. But waiting is what keeps them stuck. The truth is, action itself creates motivation. The moment you start doing something, your brain shifts gears. It stops focusing on why you don't want to do it and starts figuring out how to get it done. The hardest part is simply starting. Once you begin, momentum takes over. One of the simplest and most effective ways to push yourself into action is by using a countdown, giving yourself just a few seconds to move before hesitation kicks in. The reason this works is because it interrupts the thought patterns that lead to procrastination. Instead of sitting there debating whether or not to start, you count down from 5 and move immediately. This short-circuits the habit of overthinking and forces your brain into a new pattern of behavior. The more you do this, the more automatic it becomes, rewiring your brain to take action instead of avoiding tasks. Another powerful strategy is reducing the size of the task in your mind. One of the biggest reasons people procrastinate is because they see a task as too big or overwhelming. Their brain perceives it as a major effort, which triggers resistance. The trick is to break it down into the smallest possible step. Instead of thinking, I have to write a report, you think, I just need to write one sentence. Instead of, I have to clean the whole house, it becomes, I'll start with just one drawer. Once you take that small step, something changes. Your brain realizes that it wasn't as hard as it seemed, and you naturally continue. Small actions lead to momentum, and momentum makes the next step easier. Creating structure around your tasks can also help eliminate procrastination. When something is vague or unplanned, it's easy to put off. If you tell yourself you'll get to it later, you probably won't. But if you schedule a specific time and create a clear plan, you remove the decision-making process. Instead of debating whether or not to start, you just follow the plan you've already made. Successful people don't rely on motivation to get things done, they rely on systems. They set routines that make action automatic, so they don't have to waste energy deciding when or how to begin. Accountability is another way to break the cycle. When you're the only one who knows about a task, it's easy to let yourself off the hook. But when someone else is expecting you to follow through, you're far more likely to take action. This is why workout partners, deadlines, and public commitments work so well. Knowing that someone will check in on you creates a sense of urgency and pushes you to move even when you don't feel like it. It's also important to change how you think about failure. Many people procrastinate because they fear not doing something perfectly. They delay taking action because they don't want to make mistakes or look bad. But perfectionism is just another form of procrastination. The reality is no one gets things perfect on the first try. Progress comes from taking messy, imperfect action. Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for completion. You can always improve as you go, but nothing happens until you start. Breaking the cycle of procrastination isn't about willpower. It's about developing habits that make action easier than avoidance. The more you train yourself to take small, immediate steps, the less resistance you'll feel over time. Eventually, action becomes your default response, and procrastination loses its grip on you. One of the biggest misconceptions about overcoming procrastination is that change has to happen in big, dramatic steps. People think they need to suddenly transform into ultra-productive machines, working tirelessly without distractions, but that mindset is what keeps people stuck. The real key to breaking procrastination isn't massive effort, it's small wins. When you focus on tiny, consistent actions, you create momentum, build confidence, and retrain your brain to take action naturally instead of hesitating. The power of small wins comes from how our brains respond to progress. Every time you complete even the smallest task, your brain releases dopamine, the chemical associated with motivation and reward. This is why checking off a to-do list feels satisfying. Your brain registers it as a success, reinforcing the behavior and making it easier to take the next step. The mistake most people make is believing that only big accomplishments matter. But in reality, it's the accumulation of small actions that lead to major breakthroughs. When you're stuck in procrastination, the hardest part is starting. The task feels overwhelming, and your brain magnifies how difficult or unpleasant it will be. The trick is to lower the barrier to entry, make the task so small that it feels almost effortless. Instead of committing to writing a full report, you commit to writing just one sentence. Instead of planning an intense hour-long workout, you decide to do just 5 minutes of movement. These small actions might seem insignificant, but they accomplish two things. First, they eliminate the mental resistance that keeps you from starting. Second, they often lead to doing more than you originally planned. Once you're in motion, it's easier to keep going. This concept is backed by behavioral science. In psychology, there's something called the progress principle, which states that small, frequent progress is more motivating than occasional big wins. People who recognize their small achievements are more likely to stay consistent and feel a sense of accomplishment. On the other hand, when someone only measures success by large goals, they often feel discouraged and give up before reaching them. By focusing on small wins, you stay engaged and build momentum without feeling overwhelmed. This concept is backed by behavioral science. In psychology, there's something called the progress principle, which states that small, frequent progress is more motivating than occasional big wins. People who recognize their small achievements are more likely to stay consistent and feel a sense of accomplishment. On the other hand, when someone only measures success by large goals, they often feel discouraged and give up before reaching them. By focusing on small wins, you stay engaged and build momentum without feeling overwhelmed. The concept is backed by behavioral science. In psychology, there's something called the progress principle, which states that small, frequent progress is more motivating than occasional big wins. People who recognize their small achievements are more likely to stay consistent and feel a sense of accomplishment. On the other hand, when someone only measures success by large goals, they often feel discouraged and give up before reaching them. By focusing on small wins, you stay engaged and build momentum without feeling overwhelmed. This concept is backed by behavioral science. In psychology, there's something called the progress. Small wins also compound over time. Just like small financial investments grow through compound interest, small actions accumulate into significant progress. A person who improves by just 1% each day will be dramatically better in a year, while someone waiting for the perfect moment to make big progress will likely still be stuck. The secret to overcoming procrastination isn't waiting for motivation to strike or attempting huge leaps. It's making tiny, consistent improvements that add up over time. A practical way to implement small wins is by creating minimum goals instead of overwhelming yourself with big ones. For example, instead of saying, "I need to read for an hour every day," set a goal to read just one page. Instead of aiming for a complete diet overhaul, commit to eating one healthy meal per day. These small actions are easy to accomplish, and once you start, you often end up doing more than expected. This eliminates the mental pressure that leads to procrastination and makes action feel effortless. Another effective strategy is habit stacking, linking new small actions to habits you already do. If you want to start journaling, you can do it right after brushing your teeth. If you want to stretch more, do it while waiting for your coffee to brew. By attaching new behaviors to existing routines, you make them automatic, reducing the likelihood of procrastination. At the core of it all, small wins create positive momentum. The more you take small actions, the more confident you become in your ability to take action. Instead of seeing procrastination as an overwhelming problem to solve, you approach it step by step. Over time, those tiny steps turn into significant progress, and taking action becomes your default response rather than something you struggle with. Overcoming procrastination isn't just about getting things done in the short term, it's about building a mindset that sustains long-term success. The key to maintaining progress is consistency, not perfection. Many people fall into the trap of thinking they need to be flawless in their efforts, that they have to be productive every single day without setbacks. But this all-or-nothing mindset is one of the biggest reasons people fall back into procrastination. The reality is, setbacks are inevitable. There will be days when you don't feel like working, when distractions win, or when you slip back into old habits. The difference between those who overcome procrastination for good and those who stay stuck is how they respond to these moments. The biggest mistake people make when trying to change is believing that one failure erases all their progress. If they miss a workout, they think they've ruined their fitness plan. If they procrastinate one day, they believe they're back to square one. This kind of thinking leads to a cycle of guilt and discouragement, which makes it even harder to get back on track. But real progress isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up more often than not. A single bad day doesn't define you. What matters is what you do the next day. Instead of focusing on avoiding failure, focus on recovering quickly from it. One of the best ways to stay consistent is by building routines that make taking action automatic. When you rely on willpower alone, you set yourself up for failure because motivation is unreliable. Some days you'll feel inspired, but other days you won't. The people who succeed aren't the ones who are constantly motivated. They're the ones who create systems that make action a natural part of their day. This could be as simple as setting a specific time to work, using a planner to schedule tasks, or establishing a pre-task ritual that signals to your brain that it's time to focus. The more automatic the habit, the less effort it takes to maintain it. Another way to ensure long-term success is by setting clear but flexible goals. Many people procrastinate because their goals feel too rigid or overwhelming. Instead of aiming for perfection, it's better to have a range of success. For example, instead of saying, "I must write 1,000 words every day," you set a goal of writing between 300 and 1,000 words. This allows room for real-life challenges while still keeping you on track. A flexible approach prevents the all-or-nothing thinking that leads to giving up entirely when you can't meet an unrealistic standard. Accountability is another powerful tool for staying consistent. When you keep your progress to yourself, it's easy to let things slide. But when someone else is aware of your goals, you feel a greater sense of responsibility to follow through. This could be a friend, mentor, or even a simple commitment to post updates on social media. The external pressure helps keep you on track, especially on days when you don't feel like doing the work. It's also important to keep reminding yourself why you started in the first place. When you're deep in procrastination, tasks feel like a burden, something you have to do rather than something you want to do. But when you reconnect with your bigger purpose, you regain the drive to keep going, whether it's advancing your career, improving your health, or achieving a personal dream. Keeping your why front and center can help push you through resistance. One of the most overlooked aspects of long-term success is self-compassion. Many people think being hard on themselves will make them more productive, but the opposite is true. Harsh self-criticism creates stress and anxiety, which can actually trigger more procrastination. Instead of beating yourself up for slipping, treat yourself with the same kindness you would offer a friend. Acknowledge the mistake, learn from it, and move forward. Self-compassion doesn't mean making excuses. It means recognizing that setbacks are part of the process and refusing to let them define your journey. Ultimately, overcoming procrastination is about creating a lifestyle where action becomes the default. It's not about